So, welcome to Series 3 of Entangled Discussions. And this month's theme is the quantum effect in business. So, in this series, we'll be taking a look at the current state of play and what the future looks like as something fundamental to humanity interacts with something fundamental to the entire universe. And in this first episode, we delve into quantum computing and its effects on finance. And to guide us through this path of the known and the unknown is consistently one of the most insightful commentators in the quantum arena. Whether the topic's science, finance, culture, sociology or history, this week's guest always provides informative and interesting observations. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Esperanza Cuenca Gómez. Esperanza, welcome today.
Hi, welcome. Well, I'm actually honored to be here with all of you, and welcome also to all the people in the audience who have joined. I am thrilled to see some of the people that I interact mostly on LinkedIn. And so let's have a great conversation now. John and me would like this to be interactive. So feel free at any point to pop any questions, raise your hands, and I'm sure we are going to have a great conversation about quantum for finance.
And obviously, with these topics, there's kind of no easy questions. So why don't we dive right in? And Esperanza, why is quantum so important for finance?
Well, this is something that I think quite a lot about, and I think it has to do with how quantum computing works and what quantum computing can provide, and also the importance finance has to the economy of any country, and also the kind of problems that finance usually deals with. So it's very related to how quantum computing works, what it can bring to finance, and the challenges finance faces.
So, and obviously, quantum computing is an area that's heavily focused. But in quantum too, there's the whole breadth of quantum technologies. What do you see as perhaps some use cases and applications and a practical side to whether it's quantum computing or quantum 2 in general?
Yes, in general, as the quantum technologies are being developed and also in industry, we start to think about how can we harness this new way of computing. We start to gain clarity mostly in three areas, so to speak. And another one that is very often not mentioned, but I feel it's important. So the three main areas of quantum computing that we start to see as useful use cases for quantum computing are simulation, also optimization, and quantum machine learning. An example of simulation, it could be how to simulate the performance of certain stock, for example, of a stock market under certain conditions. Regarding optimizations, we can think about portfolio optimizations. There are some papers that have come out. Also, this is more an idea thinking about our processes in the financial industry. We have optimization problems there. So maybe we can map those optimization problems to Hamiltonian and resolve that quantumly. And then there is the area of quantum machine learning. Quantum machine learning, very much like machine learning, is concerned about finding patterns and learning about patterns. So in the financial sector, there is this growing school of thought, so to speak, about the patterns that we are concerned about, for example, fraud patterns, anti-money laundering patterns, and more broadly, patterns that led to financial crashes or patterns related to stress in a banking institution. So those would be under the umbrella of quantum machine learning. The fourth aspect that I don't see much talk about, and I feel it's important, is quantum communications. Quantum communications provide a fundamentally ultra secure communications channels. And this is, of course, very important for any industry in particular, and particularly for finance, for obvious reasons.
And amongst those, where do you see the most disruption occurring?
Well, it is difficult to say because I compare this to seeing an event horizon, right? From this side, from the event horizon, it is very difficult for us to see what's behind the horizon. And it is also important to bear in mind that quantum computing right now is at a very early stage. It is compared to when ENIAC or Mark I were being developed, those first prototypes of computers. And just to remember, when the Mark I and the Mark II were built, their main application was to calculate routes for ships. And it was very difficult for the people at that time to even imagine what we will be doing with computers at this stage. It was very hard to imagine that probably the most used application of computing some 70 years afterwards would be mobile phones. And we could have a conversation about mobile phones are phones anymore because we don't use it. We don't use them to talk very much, which was the first application in the first place. So this is pretty much the concept. However, my intuition, and this is much of a gut feeling than anything else, is that I feel that quantum machine learning is going to be very disruptive for the financial industry. Because when I think about the different applications, well, simulation, it brings a lot of opportunities as well as optimizations. The thing is, in those cases, that is, in a sense, doing what we do, but in a better way, so to speak. And with some use cases of quantum machine learning, for example, fraud detection, or also anti-money laundering, or stress tests, or modeling of detecting new patterns of crashes, we could have a discussion about that is whether or not disruptive. However, of those technologies, what I feel is quantum machine learning can provide significant disruption in the good sense of disruption, disruptive innovations, and probably in fields that we haven't even think about. So my take on this would be quantum machine learning for something we will discover along the way.
And I think as well, fundamentally, if when you're trying to predict something that is underpinned by uncertainty within an industry that works on risk, then having a crystal ball may be a little bit more difficult than predicting some other things. So, but it's interesting actually how those different applications can affect different areas of finance. And some of that is kind of offensive technology, and some is defensive technology. And there's kind of a different mindset between the two. So, with regards to that, so what sort of steps are companies within the financial industries taking when starting their quantum journeys, either on an offensive or a defensive strategy?
Yes, absolutely. What I'm seeing now in leading companies, um, in the quantum arena and also in the financial arena, and two good examples are Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, which I consider the best practices. And some banks in Spain that I know of are doing also very interesting things, also in the UK, also in the USA, apart from Goldman and JP Morgan. But I stress these two big banks because of the vision that they are having at this point. So what I see that they are doing is that they are building internal and also, in a sense, hiring people externally, but building internal capabilities for quantum computing with very strong commitment to that capability. And they are also establishing roadmaps and start exploring use cases. And there is here a key point that I would like also to emphasize, which is quantum computing, very much like aviation, is a long-term game. So when a company starts this journey, I think it is important that the company understand that it's a long-term commitment, that it's going to be capital intensive for many years, and it is a long-term commitment. Our best estimations now it is that maybe at the end of this decade we will start seeing what some call useful quantum computers. So the work now is more about to be ready when we have those machines, that having those machines and those immediate benefits right now. And when I see these banks, this long-term vision, it is very wise in my opinion, because also the quantum arena, it can be challenging and the learning curve is not immediate. So it's important to plan ahead to avoid to be left behind.
And I think it's interesting you mentioned Goldman Sachs, and obviously they took Will Zhang from Rigetti, and these aren't the sort of steps you take unless you're very serious about creating an end goal for the technology or for the application. So, and and obviously with regards to that transfer of knowledge or talent, and something that's obviously very close to my heart. Is that sort of quantum workforce or quantum ready workforce? And as someone who's been recruiting into quantum for 7 years now, and previously had recruited into banking and insurance, and the sort of the idiosyncrasies of building those workforces are extremely different. So I'd like to hear a bit more about your views on that building that quantum workforce that's going to take finance to the towards the goals that are being aimed towards.
Yeah, and this is actually a thing that I also reflect a lot upon. And for me, quantum workforce is a critical, is not only a critical, but the critical step in any quantum journey. Because at the end of the day, companies are people. So if you want to be a quantum company, you need quantum people, right? That is the first step. So now, how do we do that? Now that we have the vision that we want to be a quantum company, that we don't want to be left behind, because quantum technologies are crucial for finance industry in general, for all sectors, but we are talking about finance, of course. How do we do that? And I think here the key is a combination of internal and external expertise. my belief is that I I I don't think that a quantum workforce is something that you plug and play into a company. And I think that somehow companies need to create a quantum mindset, which is very much a cultural change. Now, to do that, it is important to identify inside the company if there are any quantum enthusiasts. And there might be surprises, there might be some. Or if there aren't, there might be some candidates that you start to see that there are people who are interested in new technologies, or or with some kind of, how would I put it, some kind of a curiosity towards learning new things. And then externally, I think companies would also need to hire talent externally to integrate inside the company and somehow create that quantum workforce and quantum mindset. Bearing in mind that it could be challenging at time because, well, there are not much of us. So that is something also to bear in mind. I see a mixture of hiring and nurturing.
And it's interesting actually because I deal with lots of companies that are in the quantum space, and there's kind of no roadmap for what they're looking to do, and they're in the quantum space. They don't have the sort of the pre-existing business. They've got a bit more freedom. So the challenge within such a well-established arena as finance and banking and all that goes with that, the importance of that as well. It's it's a challenge that it has to be done correctly. But as you say, it's not kind of a plug and play model, or that you can just implement another model that's worked previously. So, and one of the things you mentioned was that kind of the risk of not getting left behind. And then I see kind of the two sides. There's the one side that kind of wants to sort of shoot for the moon, see what can happen. The other side that doesn't want to get left behind, and they're very different mindsets, both with their own risk and reward. So within the sort of finance sector, what do you see that the potential risks or hazards to banks of trying to implement a quantum workforce and a quantum strategy?
Well, this is actually that we have seen before in finance and in other industries, but we have seen it in finance and with some tragic results. And the thing is, it has to do a lot with the speed of change. And as we saw with other technologies which are now in a more mature stage, so to speak, for example, artificial intelligence and machine learning are two great examples. Well, what happened to the companies who didn't, in a way, keep up with that speed of change? Well, things looked pretty dire, and the ones who weren't able to keep up, well, things didn't go very well for them. And the ones who did who did keep up, in a sense, or were able to keep up, well, they were able to do so, but with a tremendously big amount of effort and even suffering, which tragically was totally avoidable if they would have started before. Now, those who were ahead of the game, in a sense, had a clear competitive advantage and didn't went through all the pain and suffering that the others did. So the story of all of this is, and the learned lessons is, my advice would be start as soon as you can, because otherwise it can be very difficult and challenging. We have very cautionary tales of other technologies, and it would be very sad to be caught up again in the same trap, so to speak. And also the thing about quantum, it is that mm, it will take time. And it's important to acknowledge that. It is important to acknowledge the uncertainty and trust the process.
And I think as well, actually, where you mentioned about starting early, the more thorough the journey, the process, the more robust it is. And the one of the common challenges that I think a lot of people have identified from previous technologies and business models is managing the hype and the expectation, to keep things realistic rather than have the for want of a better term, the sort of propaganda or gossip run out of control, and all of a sudden you've got this thing on your hands that can do everything, and the expectations are raised. It then causes a kind of a bubble effect as expectations, the wild expectations aren't realised, or at least aren't realised within the time frame expected. And within something, an industry as well established as finance, those sorts of things can be incredibly challenging. So, and do you think there's a particular roadmap that companies can follow to minimise the chances of that, or is that something that will be learnt along the way?
Well, from what I see from other companies and for companies in the financial sector, I can see trends that, in my opinion, are on the right path. So the roadmap, I would say, is there is first a stage of learning and of exploration. And that learning phase implies setting up training schemes for employees, bringing people to talk into the company, and start thinking about good candidates for the financial quantum workforce inside the company. Now, the second stage, and again, we see great examples in JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, is bringing external people, combining them with internal people, and creating that first quantum laboratory or quantum workforce. And those are the guys who start to develop the roadmap, the quantum roadmap of the company. And they start working inside the company, thinking about use cases and also publishing papers. This is important. This is something that we see a lot in big technological companies such as Google and Amazon, just to name a few, Microsoft as well. For a financial institution is something different to do fundamental research in technology, which is that we see in these companies, and publishing technological papers. That is something different in a sense and in a sense also part of what traditionally one could see in the financial sector. And then once we have established this group, we are working in use cases, and somehow the quantum culture is permeating into the organization. It is the time to build things, to build proof of concepts, and eventually bringing those proof of concepts into production. Now, and this is very specific of financial institutions. For a financial institution, bringing things into production is something sensitive, delicate, and in a sense complicated. And it is so because first, the stability of the system of the financial institution or of the bank must always be protected. It has to work at all times. It's very much like a plane. It has to work at all times because, I mean, at the end of the day, just like a plane is flying, financial institution manage our money. So it's a critical operation, and we all understand that, just like when we see a plane flying. However, there are a lot of procedures, and that is something that is absolutely controlled, just like we control flight or flying operation. And then I would say the second part is that, up to my knowledge, financial institutions don't have their own quantum computers. Eventually, they might decide to build their in-house quantum computing, but it seems more reasonable to access a quantum computer on the cloud. To do so, it is also very important to security side the communication with that quantum computer, to establish secure communication protocols and to ensure the operation there, and also to reflect and think about which data the financial institution feels comfortable sending outside their systems. And that's the last step. And all of these that I'm describing are actually practicalities of the awesome feat of having a financial institution computing quantumly and accessing a quantum computer on the cloud and having algorithms and use cases in production which are done quantumly and which at the end of the day are delivering tangible value to the business and to the clients, of course.
And I'd like to come back to this theme a bit because the audience is starting to ask questions, which
That's great. Yeah, let's walk through them.
But before we go there, I just wanted to, obviously with Entangled Discussions, it's about the personal side as well. So and some of these questions will come back to this topic, but I'd really like to delve a little bit deeper into actually what started your journey with sort of finance and quantum. What inspires you, Esperanza?
Well, that's a great question that I love to answer, and maybe some in the audience feel also identified in a sense with these. I was always fascinated with quantum mechanics. I studied industrial engineering, and for an industrial engineering perspective, we live in the Newtonian world, right? We don't deal into the intricacies of quantum mechanics. And I was fascinated by it. And I also started to think about, is there any way we can harness this? And even a crazier, in the good sense of crazy, of could we compute using quantum mechanics? That was a fundamental question. So I started reading and then taking courses and then getting into interest groups. And this is pretty much how it all started. Writing, posting, doing as much as I can in summary. And what I would say to anyone who's here with us and who's passionate about this is do as much as you can, learn as much as you can, write as much as you can, post as much as you can, meet as many awesome people as you can. And in the end, the wave function of the universe will collapse, and it will collapse in ways we cannot anticipate, but in ways that will be the best ways. And this is what I would say, yeah. And this is my quantum journey.
And I think certainly from personal interaction with you, the writing, learning, and posting as much as possible, certainly ticking those boxes. So the first question was from Jan, and he wondered if you felt that finance is an obvious application to quantum computers, or would other sectors benefit from it beforehand, such as chemistry or medical? And what your thoughts were on that?
That is a great question, and thank you so much for making it. The reality of that is that we don't know, right? That's the short answer to that. We don't know. However, of all the sectors that you mentioned, those are indeed the ones that are starting to emerge as the first use cases. So we start to see use cases in chemistry, as you very rightly pointed out. Also, we are seeing use cases in aviation, communications, automotive. There are a lot of industries, right? And of course, finance. Finance emerged as one of the first industries with clear use cases. Now, the caution here is that, and it's the part that we really don't know, up to an extent, we don't know how difficult and how resource intensive, and when I say resources, computational resources, those use cases are going to be, and also how those use cases are going to map better to current or future technologies. So we start to have an intuition about which industries could benefit, at least from this side of the event horizon, but we still don't know where we could see the first killer application, so to speak. And what I would suggest is this is actually inspiring to do research and see how this turns out. This can bring material for many research papers, and I would encourage to do research on this.
And I think it's interesting that the potential for it to be self-fulfilling as well, that as the technology becomes more advanced, it would lead to more advances off the back of that technology as well.
Yeah.
So we also had a question from Marek. So Marek, if you'd like to unmute and join in.
Yeah.
Or I can ask the question if not. So Marek was interested in understanding if you saw any best practices to start with quantum computing in a financial organization.
Yes, absolutely. I would say if for any financial institution to start from scratch, what I would advise is to start giving talks, inviting people to come to give talks, set training courses for the organization, and start also an internal awareness, try to present the idea to relevant stakeholders, because the starting point is about creating awareness and creating um, initial quantum culture, and also gaining sponsorship. And in my experience, organizations and financial institutions in particular who are advanced in their quantum journeys, they started doing that. So it's all about training, learning, and transferring knowledge into the organization and gaining sponsorship.
And the questions are coming in now thick and fast. So we've also got a question from Thomas as well. So Thomas, if you can unmute and please join us. Well, I've got the question here. So Thomas was interested actually on the hardware side of things. So he was wondering if you had any thoughts on what qubit technology might be give the most promise to for financial quantum applications in the next 5 to 10 years, whether that's trapped ion, photonics, annealing, or one of the other many runners in the race.
That's a great question, Thomas. That is a very interesting question. Holding the most promise to finance, it's difficult. It's difficult to say because one needs to think about which applications of finance, right? And what do we see at, in a sense, provided quick wins, right? Of all those technologies, the leading ones right now are superconducting qubits and ion traps. Those technologies implement universal quantum computing and gate-based quantum computing. So if we think about general purpose algorithms, so to speak, and a general purpose quantum computing model, or better say computing models, one might think that those technologies, superconducting and ion trap, might be the most promising for finance. The thing with those technologies is that there are doubts about their scalability, but at the same time, there are very interesting roadmaps and even ambitious one released by IBM and Honeywell, just to name a few, just to name the two leading ones, I would say, that offer a significant quantum volume and number of qubits. So those technologies, as the leading ones, seem promising from this side of the event horizon, right? Again, this is what we see right now, thinking in a way linearly. And it could come another technology that we are not aware of. The quantum transistor might be invented, and it could be something totally new. There is also another technology that Thomas mentioned in his question, and he speaks about quantum annealing. And this is also very interesting. Quantum annealing is a specific purpose way of quantum computing, and it deals with optimization problems. And we have plenty of that in the finance industry. And the thing with quantum annealing or quantum annealers, these are the machines that D-Wave builds, is that they have a huge number of qubits. And we are talking about number of qubits in the order of thousands. That's a lot. And what we do is basically we throw the problem over there to optimize. The machine only optimizes, and we throw the problem and see what happens. There are also challenges in terms of scalability, and we are not sure now if quantum annealing provides an interesting advantage, but it could be. So, and optimization problems are also very relevant to the financial industry. So, from my point of view, thinking linearly, I would say superconducting and ion traps seem very promising technologies in the short term. Quantum annealers can bring also significant improvement in 5 to 10 years for optimization problems. And that is also really interesting. And there is also the surprise factor. Something totally new could come up, something that we are not talking about right now because it has not been discovered yet.
And just to sort of square the circle off, so that's the hardware angle. Abhijit has asked, what algorithms in finance do you see that offer the promise of scaling? So we cover bases.
That's question by Abhijit is also great because in quantum computing, the hardware side and the software side and the algorithm side are all very strongly related because algorithms, because the machines now are small and noisy. So Abhijit is totally hitting the nail when he says, now we have issues in terms of circuit width and depth. Yeah, there are issues in terms of scaling. So how do we scale this? It's difficult to tell. And again, there are not so many algorithms specific for finance because what I see are proof of concepts that deal more with optimization problems and with the variational angle solver algorithm. And that how that algorithm scale has to do with the hardware. Again, our purpose, purpose, purpose meant machines where you throw the algorithm, and as it is also where most of the research right now is focused, I would say that is what it shows the most promise to scale. And again, what we see from this side of the event horizon, something totally new might come up as soon as tomorrow. We don't know. There is a lot of uncertainty, but I would probably put my bet now on optimization algorithms.
And obviously, something that is a regular topic when talking about the whole of quantum two is the sort of ethics and regulations and what control mechanisms in place. And Marek has asked about regulation in quantum algorithms. Obviously, the debate's happening within AI and machine learning. What sort of issues do you think this will bring up within quantum computing?
That's a great question, Marek. Absolutely great. As John said in his introduction, I'm fascinated about the intersection of ethics, technology, um, also even philosophy. So thank you so much, Marek, for this question. And indeed, the regulation of quantum algorithms is it's a key, I wouldn't say issue, but it can become an issue, but it's a key topic because at the end of the day, um, the, the, the question is broader and bigger than the technology we use, whether it's quantum or is classical. And indeed, there is a very active debate about regulating artificial intelligence. And of course, this debate will come also to quantum. And my opinion, it is that it is very important that a strong ethical principle and even philosophical principle are embedded into the design and development of algorithms, regardless of the technology we use, regardless of if we use quantum or classical or another thing that we might invent along the way. I'm by maybe from my background and for what I have studied, I have a very strong influence of Kant in my thinking and also in general of humanist philosophy, if you wish, on a broader term. And it is my conviction that in regarding regulation of algorithms, um, the individual as a rational being must be in the center. And from that, algorithms must take that into consideration, the inherent dignity of individuals for being rational beings.
And we certainly struck on a theme with the algorithm discussion. So, and Abhijit has asked if you can suggest any key performance indicators when judging the merits of quantum variational algorithms.
Yeah, absolutely, Abhijit, and that's that's a fascinating question. Usually, when we are judging what we call quantum advantage, there is a lot of research and I would say emphasis on speed. And all the talk is about the speed, whether there is an speed up or not. And in fact, especially guys interested with quantum machine learning and also to a lesser extent with quantum variational algorithms, but particularly the guys in the quantum machine learning scene, they think a lot about speed, and so on. And don't get me wrong, of course, speed is very important. And that would be for me the most immediate KPI that you need to take into consideration. However, there is also another figure of merit, so to speak, of KPI, which is a broader concept. That concept, in a sense, is the quality of the solution. And this is very specific of quantum variational algorithms. With a quantum variational algorithm, what we are trying to do is to find a solution, an optimal solution. Here, we are not so concerned about achieving the best solution, but it's very often to have a good enough solution. And that good enough solution means better in the same time as a classical computer might provide us. So when we think about this concept update, we are not so concerned about speed because we are assuming that we can wait the same time as a classical computer. But if a machine in the same time provides a better solution, and it doesn't need to be dramatically better, it can be incrementally better, but in the same time, that is very interesting. For example, in the case of portfolio management, which is a well-known optimization problem, because we are talking about volumes of assets and ETN of money so big, if somehow we are able to achieve, I would say 2%, 3% improvement quantumly, even in the same time, well, that is very interesting. And even if I'm spending the same time doing the computation. So I would focus on speed and quality of the solution. Now, the particularities of how we define the quality of the solution obviously is tied to the problem that we are trying to solve.
And I think I certainly wouldn't be doing my job as a host if I didn't ask for some a kind of a broader summary from yourself as to further comments regard to sort of bring these strands together. Given the technical, finance, philosophical, cultural background themes that you bring to topics, I think that would be a wonderful way to finish the talk.
Yeah, sorry, I was reading here a final question by Mihaela that I find particularly fascinating. If possible, I will try to briefly address this and then have some closing remarks. But I didn't want to left it behind because it's a really good one.
Yeah, that must have come in whilst I was.
Yeah, I think it came at the same time that you were talking. Sorry for this. Well, Mihaela is asking a very interesting question, and I'm very happy, Mihaela, that you bring that out loud. This question has to do with the intersection of blockchain and quantum technologies and cryptography. Now, it is true that one of the well-known applications of quantum computing, and it has been known for quite a long time, is Shor algorithm. And Shor algorithm is a factoring algorithm, which potentially can make all of our encryption schemes vulnerable to a quantum attack. We know that. And that hopefully won't happen tomorrow, right? There is a time frame that we estimate a quantum computer could execute Shor algorithm for our current cryptographic scheme. We estimate of the estimations talk about 10 years time frame, maybe more, maybe less, around the 10 years mark. That indeed could pose a threat. However, there is also talk about post-quantum cryptography, which are schemes of cryptography that are resistant to a quantum attack, right? Understanding quantum attack as an implementation of Shor algorithms. So, and Mihaela points out, I think that is a paradox, and it could be in a sense that quantum computing can bring ultra secure communications, as we know from QKD protocols and classically, well, leaving aside the post-quantum schemes. And also potentially it could bring risk also into the arena. And at the end of the day, this all has a lot to do with how different institutions get ready for the quantum technologies and the potential quantum threats. There are a lot of lines of research into this. And yes, in a sense, Mihaela, are two sides of the same coin. And I think it's important to bring these themes into the table and to have a conversation about this. So thank you. It was a great question.
That's really useful.
Oh, I think Mihaela, can we? I think I heard you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for addressing the question. I was wondering if there's already been any development in this area of developing a post-quantum resistant.
Yeah, Mihaela. Recently, NIST, the National Standard Institution in the United States released notes, and they are working on a standardization of post-quantum cryptography, and it's a very active line of research there, and also a line of research that I haven't read too much about, but I think is really fascinating, is the intersection of quantum and blockchain, not only in terms of communications and cryptography, but also in terms of computing. Now, the computing side is not so clear because of the way of quantum technology works and how the blockchain works. There is confusion there about whether is a scheme where quantum can provide advantage. And on the cryptography side, I think there is a clear intersection there and a very, I would say, interesting and fruitful field for researching.
Yeah,
and
okay, thank you very much.
Also, Thomas is sharing in the chat that there is a company trying to make Ethereum, which is a crypto coin, Ethereum quantum resistant. I didn't know that, Thomas, and that is pretty awesome, actually.
And then there's also the dilemma of people storing old data until the technology catches up. So if data is time sensitive in that way, and that's a really interesting problem because it's not purely technical then, is it? It involves a very different mindset maybe into how to make that data less valuable if it holds valuable information that's still relevant. So it's certainly an interesting minefield there. So you've got your work cut out for you on that one, Esperanza.
Yeah.
And as I was saying before, it wouldn't be fair to have everyone here and not hear kind of a holistic overview of all of the things we've discussed today.
Yeah. Well, first, I would like to say that it is awesome to be here with you all, sharing this hour that is coming to an end. I don't want to keep you guys too much time because, as you can tell, I'm really passionate about this, and I could stay here all day long. However, I would like to stress and to thank you for participating and giving your insights and your questions. And as closing remarks, what I would like to emphasize is that despite all the challenges, quantum computing, or more broadly quantum technologies, are facing today, I'm also cautiously convinced that this technology is going to dramatically change a lot of industries. And it is my intuition that quantum applied for finance is going to be one of the first use cases and one of the first industries where we are going to see tangible results. So what I would say also is, if any of you is interested in finance and passionate about quantum, I would encourage you to explore the field and to research and try to do as much as you can.
Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for all of your wise words and comments, and being so amenable with the audience. It's been a fantastic discussion, Esperanza, and I know that I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and from the comments, certainly everyone else seems to have. And obviously there were people that came in through the conversation. This will be going up on Entangled Discussions YouTube page. Either if you didn't see it all, or if, like myself, you want to see it again, that will be on YouTube. So thanks for everything today, Esperanza, and I'm sure we'll be able to have you back on for a future talk. And speaking of future talks, we're back next week. Again on the theme of the quantum effect in business, where we'll be joined by Danica Hanan, who has, without giving too much away, has made a really interesting journey from business, grew an interest in quantum, and has now found a really important and interesting role. So that's certainly one not to miss next week. So it'll be at the same time, 4:30 BST next Tuesday on the 8th. And once again, thank you, Esperanza, and thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you all.